She found the human child crying in the ashes. Now he calls her mother Asterisk. The crimson dust of Kepler-7 swirled around Zara's environmental suit as she stepped from her diplomatic transport onto the devastated moon's surface. The Valdris negotiator had seen countless war zones during her 20-year career, but the systematic destruction here made her pale blue skin flush with disgust. Twisted metal and shattered dome structures stretched endlessly across the barren landscape, testament to humanity's capacity for self-destruction. Her assignment was simple: mediate between the warring human factions that had turned this once thriving research colony into a graveyard. The Valdris Council maintained strict neutrality in human conflicts, but the escalating violence threatened shipping lanes crucial to their trade networks. Zara's job was to broker a ceasefire, nothing more. As she navigated through the rubble of what had been the main laboratory complex, her enhanced hearing detected something that made her freeze. A soft whimper, barely audible above the howling wind, drifted from beneath a collapsed wall section. Her training screamed at her too. Ignore it. The Valdris Code strictly forbade interference in other species' internal affairs. Yet something deeper, more primal, compelled her forward. Moving carefully through the debris, she discovered a narrow gap where support beams had created a small pocket of protection. Inside, a human male sat hunched against the wall, his military uniform torn and bloodied. Dark hair fell across his face, but she could see the tremor in his hands as he clutched a damaged communication device. "Hello," she said softly, her voice translator converting her melodic Valdris speech into standard human. "I'm Zara of the Valdris Diplomatic Corps. Are you injured?" The man's head snapped up, revealing haunted brown eyes and several days' worth of stubble. He couldn't have been more than 30 standard years old, yet he looked aged beyond his time. "Stay back," he whispered hoarsely. "They might still be watching." Zara's heart, a organ that beat with the same rhythm as any human's, clenched at the raw fear in his voice. Who might be watching? The fighting ended 3 days ago. "The fighting never ends," he replied, his voice cracking. "I'm Joran Malik, former sergeant with the Colonial Defense Force. Or at least, I was before ... He trailed off, staring at his hands against every protocol she'd been taught. Zara found herself crawling into the small space beside him. Her people were naturally empathetic, but this felt different, personal. "Before what, Joran?" His story tumbled out in broken fragments. The surprise attack on his outpost, watching his squad members die one by one, the order to retreat that never came. He'd been hiding in these ruins for weeks, surviving on emergency rations and rainwater, afraid to venture out lest the enemy patrols find him. "I couldn't save them," he whispered. "I was supposed to protect them, and I failed." Zara's training warred with her instincts as she watched this broken warrior crumble before her eyes. The Valdris were a peaceful species, having evolved beyond the need for violence millennia ago. Yet they understood trauma, understood the weight of loss. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his trembling ones. "You survived," she said gently. "That's not failure. That's hope." The moment their skin touched, something electric passed between them. Joran's eyes widened, and Zara felt her own pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, not just politically, but personally. The Valdris had encountered humans before, but always maintained careful distance. Physical contact was reserved for family, for bonded pairs among her own kind. Yet here she was, holding the hand of a human stranger, feeling more connected to him than she had to anyone in years. A rational part of her mind screamed warnings, but her heart had already made its choice. "Come with me," she whispered, knowing she was about to change both their lives forever. "Let me help you heal." The diplomatic vessel Serenity's edge hummed quietly through hyperspace, its advanced Valdris engines creating barely a whisper as they traversed the void between star systems. In the sterile white corridors of the ship, Zara walked with practiced calm toward the detention bay, a medical kit tucked discreetly under her arm dot to her crew. Joran was a prisoner, a human soldier, captured for interrogation about the ongoing conflict on Kepler-7. Only she knew the truth, that he was a broken soul she couldn't bring herself to abandon, despite every law and protocol screaming at her to do otherwise. The detention bay's door hissed open, revealing a sparse but comfortable cell. Joran sat on the narrow cot, his wounds cleaned and bandaged, wearing a simple gray uniform that hung loose on his thin frame. 3 days of regular meals had brought some color back to his cheeks, but his eyes still held that haunted quality that made Zara's heart ache. "How are you feeling?" she asked, setting the medical kit on the small table. "Like a prisoner," he replied, but there was no hostility in his voice. "Though I have to admit, this is the most comfortable cage I've ever been in." Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks, a trait she'd inherited from her people's ancient evolutionary past. "I'm sorry for the deception. It was the only way to get you off that moon without raising questions." "Questions from who?" "Your government." "My people have very strict rules about interfering in other species' conflicts," she admitted, moving closer to examine his healing wounds. "What I did taking you aboard could be considered an act of war by some factions." Joran caught her hand as she reached for his bandages. "Then why risk it? Why help me?" The question hung in the air between them like a charged particle field. Zara had asked herself the same thing countless times since leaving Kepler-7. Rational answer was that she'd acted on humanitarian impulse, that any civilized being would have done the same. But the truth was more complex, more frightening. "I don't know," she whispered. "When I saw you in that rubble, something inside me ... awakened. We have a concept in Valdris culture called Thrinae, a connection between souls that transcends physical form. I thought it was just mythology until you met me," Joran finished, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The touch sent electricity through her nervous system. Valdris were naturally sensitive to emotional energy. But this was different. This was intimate in ways her people rarely experienced outside of lifelong bonds. "This is impossible," she breathed, even as she found herself leaning closer to him. "We're different species. The physiological barriers alone. Are you trying to convince me or yourself?" Joran's free hand came up to cup her face, his fingers, marveling at the soft, pearl-like quality of her skin. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two beings from different worlds who had found something neither had expected. Zara's species had evolved beyond the need for passionate emotion, prizing logic and harmony above all else. Yet here she was, feeling her pulse race, as Joran's eyes darkened with something that transcended reason. "I should go," she whispered, making no move to leave. "Should," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "But you won't." She shook her head, knowing she was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "No, I won't." Their kiss was tentative at first, an exploration of the impossible. Joran's lips were warm and soft against hers, tasting of the sweet Valdris fruit she'd been sharing with him. Zara had never kissed anyone before her. People expressed affection through mental connection and gentle touch, but instinct guided her as she melted into his embrace. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Zara's carefully. Maintained composure had crumbled completely, leaving her feeling raw and exposed. "What happens now?" Joran asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Now we figure out how to survive in a universe that says we shouldn't exist," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Over the following days, as the ship continued its journey through hyperspace, they stole moments together whenever possible. Zara would bring him meals and medical supplies, staying longer each. Time to talk about their respective worlds, their dreams, their fears. Joran spoke of Earth's blue skies and the poetry of human composers, while Zara shared the crystalline cities of Valdris Prime and the ancient songs of her people. The crew began to notice their captain's unusual interest in the prisoner, but none dared question her directly. Zara's reputation as a skilled negotiator had earned her considerable autonomy, and she used every bit of it to protect their growing connection. On the seventh night, as she prepared to leave his cell after their evening meal, Joran caught her. "Hand, stay," he said simply, and despite every law of her people, every rule of her profession, she did. 5 years had passed since that first night aboard the Serenity's Edge, and Zara barely recognized the woman she'd been then. The careful, composed diplomat had been replaced by someone fiercer, more protective, shaped by love and motherhood. In ways she'd never imagined possible, their hidden sanctuary on the remote world of Nivalis had become home a converted research station tucked into a mountain valley, surrounded by bioluminescent forests that painted the night sky in shades of purple and gold. Here, far from the prying eyes of both their peoples, they had built a life together. "Mama Zara, look." Their daughter Naya's voice rang out across the meadow, filled with the pure joy that only a 5-year-old could possess. She stood 50 meters away, her arms outstretched, surrounded by a shimmering field of energy that made the air itself seem to dance. Zara's heart clenched with a mixture of pride and fear. Naya was beautiful beyond words, with her father's dark hair and determined chin, but her mother's luminous skin and enlarged eyes that shifted color with her emotions. Right now, those eyes were a brilliant silver, reflecting the power that coursed through her small frame. "Very good, little star," Zara called back, using the pet name that had emerged naturally in their mixture of languages. "But remember what we discussed about control." Joran emerged from the workshop behind there. Home, his hair now streaked with premature gray, tools still in his hands. The years had been kind to him. The haunted soldier had been replaced by a devoted father and partner, though Zara knew he still carried scars from his past. "She's getting stronger," he murmured, wrapping his arms around Zara's waist as they watched their daughter play. The energy readings this morning were off the charts. "I know." Zara leaned back against his chest, drawing comfort from his warmth. "I've been monitoring her cellular activity. The hybrid genetics are creating pathways that shouldn't exist, neural connections that bridge human creativity with Valdris empathic abilities. Is that dangerous?" "I don't know," she admitted. "There's no precedent for this. We're in uncharted territory." Their peaceful moment was shattered by the sharp whistle of an approaching ship. Both parents tensed, years of vigilance kicking in as they watched a sleek vessel descend toward their valley. It bore the markings of the Valdris Diplomatic. Core Zara's former life come calling. "Take Naya inside," Zara ordered, her voice taking on the commanding tone she'd once used to negotiate peace treaties. "Use the shielded room. What about you? I have to handle this." She turned in his arms, memorizing his face with desperate intensity. "Whatever happens, protect her. She's the future of both our species, whether they know it or not." The ship landed with practiced precision, and Zara was unsurprised to see her former colleague Vesh emerge from the airlock. The tall Valdris male had always been ambitious, his pearl-white skin and silver hair marking him as pure-blooded nobility. His expression was cold as he approached, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Zara Threnai," he said, using her full ceremonial name. "You are charged with violation of the non-interference protocols, unauthorized genetic experimentation, and corruption of species purity." "Hello, Vesh," she replied calmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "I assume this isn't a social call." 5 years, Zara. 5 years you've been hiding out here with that human, creating an abomination that threatens the very foundations of our society. Her name is Naya, Zara said sharply. And she's my daughter. Vesh's eyes flickered with something. That might have been pity. I tried to protect you. When the reports first came in, I buried them, hoping you'd come to your senses. But word has spread. The Purity Council knows about the hybrid child. And what do they want? They want her eliminated. The human, too. You they might spare, if you return willingly and undergo re-education. Zara felt ice form in her veins. You know I can't do that. Then you know why I'm here. Vesh gestured to his guards, who raised their weapons. I'm sorry, old friend, but some contaminations cannot be allowed to spread. The world exploded into chaos as Jorn burst from the house, a modified plasma rifle. In his hands, the first shot took down one of the guards before they could react. Zara threw herself forward, her diplomatic training giving way to maternal fury as she tackled Vesh to the ground. Run! She screamed toward the house. Take Naya. And run. But even as she fought, she knew it was too late. More ships were descending from the sky-human vessels, bearing the insignia of the Colonial Defense Force. Someone had betrayed them to both sides. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Naya standing in the doorway, her eyes now blazing with silver. Fire, her small hands crackling with energy that made the air itself scream. The hybrid child was no longer hiding her abilities. She was embracing them, and the universe would never be the same. The stolen cargo hauler Wanderer's dream shuddered through hyperspace. Its aging engines pushed far beyond their design limits. In the cramped crew quarters, Zara worked frantically over a star chart while Joran kept watch on their sleeping daughter. 3 months had passed since the attack on Nivalis. 3 months of running, hiding, and watching their pursuers close in from both sides. There, Zara pointed to a distant system on the holographic display. The Terminus sector. Its lawless space, no government oversight, no treaties with either of our species. Joran nodded grimly, his weathered hands checking the power cell on his rifle for the 100th time. It's also crawling with pirates, slavers, and worse. Not exactly the ideal place to raise a child. It's the only place left, Zara replied, her voice hollow with exhaustion. The Valdris Purity Council has branded us genetic terrorists. The Human Colonial Defense Force wants Naya for their super soldier program. At least in Terminus space, we can disappear. A soft whimper from the sleeping alcove drew their attention. Naya was having another nightmare, her small body glowing with unstable energy as her subconscious mind wrestled with abilities she couldn't fully control. At 8 years old, she was already more powerful than most adult Valdris, but the emotional toll was devastating. Zara slipped into the alcove, gathering her daughter into her arms. She, little star, you're safe. We're here. Naya's eyes fluttered open, their color shifting from silver to deep blue as she recognized her mother's voice. I saw him again, Mama. The man with the cold eyes. Vesh, Joran muttered, his jaw tightening. He's still hunting us. Not just him, Naya whispered, her young voice carrying a weight that no child should bear. There's another one, a human with scars on his face. He wants to use me as a weapon. Zara and Joran exchanged glances over their daughter's head. Crix Donovan, the human supremacist leader who'd been consolidating power among the outer colonies. His fanatical followers believed that humanity's destiny lay in conquering the galaxy with hybrid beings like Naya as their ultimate weapons. We won't let anyone hurt you, Zara promised, though she wondered how long they could keep running. Their resources were dwindling, and Naya's growing powers were becoming harder to hide. The ship's proximity alarms suddenly screamed to life. Joran rushed to the controls, his face pale as he read the sensor displays. 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace. They found us. Human or Valdris? Zara asked, already knowing the answer from his expression. Both, he replied grimly. Looks like they've decided to cooperate. The first impact sent them tumbling as weapons fire raked across their hull. Zara clutched Naya protectively, while Jorn fought to maintain control of their dying ship. Through the viewport, she could see the sleek forms of Valdra's interceptors. Working alongside human destroyers, two species that had barely tolerated each other for centuries, now united in their desire to capture or kill her family. There's an asteroid field ahead, Joran called out over the screaming alarms. If I can get us into it. Another blast tore through their starboard engine, sending them spinning helplessly. Zara watched in horror as one of the pursuing ships moved to intercept, its docking clamps extending like grasping fingers. "Mama," Naya's voice was strangely calm. "I have to stop them." "No, sweetheart. You're too young. I'm the only one who can." Naya's eyes blazed with silver fire as she stood, her small form radiating power that made the air itself crackle. "They hurt Daddy. They want to hurt you. I won't let them." Before either parent could stop her, Naya pressed her hands against the hull and released the energy she'd been struggling to control. The effect was immediate and terrifying, a wave of pure force that reached across space itself, short-circuiting the pursuing ships, systems and leaving them drifting helplessly in the void. But the effort left Naya collapsed and unconscious, her small body burning with fever as her hybrid physiology struggled to cope with the power she'd unleashed. Zara gathered her daughter close, feeling the child's erratic heartbeat against her chest. "She can't keep doing this," Joran said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "It's killing her." "I know," Zara replied, tears streaming down her face. "But what choice do we have? The universe has decided she's too dangerous to live and too valuable to die." As their damaged ship limped toward the asteroid field, Zara made a decision that would change everything. They couldn't keep running forever, not with Naya's powers growing stronger and more unstable each day. It was time to make a stand, to force both species to confront the reality of what they'd created through their hatred and fear. "Set course for the Nexus station," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of her former diplomatic rank. "Zara, that's suicide. The Nexus is neutral territory. Both sides will converge there." "Exactly." She looked down at her unconscious daughter, seeing not just her child, but the future of interspecies relations. "We're going to end this. One way or another, we're going to make them see that love is stronger than fear." In the distance, the massive space station grew larger, its lights twinkling like stars against the cosmic darkness. Somewhere in those corridors, the fate of two species would be decided by a hybrid child who just wanted to protect her family. The central plaza of Nexus Station buzzed with tension as representatives from both species gathered for what many expected to be the final confrontation. Massive holographic displays showed the approaching fleets, the Valdra's Purity Councils. Pristine white ships forming perfect geometric patterns, while the human Colonial Defense Force's gray vessels spread out in aggressive combat formations. At the center of it all, Zara stood with her family on a raised platform, her diplomatic immunity the only thing keeping them from being arrested on sight. 10 years had passed since that first meeting in the ruins of Kepler-7, and the woman who had once prized logic above all else now faced the ultimate test of her convictions. Naya, now 13 and possessing a quiet strength that reminded Zara of her father, stood between her parents with her head held high. Her hybrid features had only grown more pronounced with age, the luminous skin of her mother's people combined with the determined jawline of her father's, creating a face that was both beautiful and alien to pure-blooded members of either species. "Are you ready, little star?" Zara whispered, using the pet name that had followed their daughter through childhood. "I've been ready my whole life," Naya replied, her voice carrying wisdom beyond her years. "The question is whether they are." Vesh approached from the Valdris delegation, his once pristine appearance now marked by the stress of years spent hunting them. Behind him came Crix Donovan, the scarred human supremacist whose fanatical followers had turned the outer colonies into a powder keg of racial hatred. "This ends now," Vesh declared, his voice carrying across the plaza. "Return the abomination to us for proper disposal, and we might consider mercy for the parents." "The hybrid belongs to humanity," Crix snarled, his mechanical eye focusing on Naya with predatory intensity. "She represents the next phase of human evolution, a weapon that will secure our dominance among the stars." "She represents nothing but contamination," Vesh shot back, his usual composure cracking. "A perversion of natural order that threatens the purity of both species." "Her name is Naya," Joran said quietly, stepping forward with his rifle held. "Loose but ready, and she's not a weapon or an abomination. She's our daughter." The two leaders turned their attention to the small family, and Zara felt the weight of two civilizations pressing down on them. In the distance, she could see the news feeds, broadcasting this confrontation across the galaxy billions of beings, watching to see whether fear or love would triumph. "I've spent my life negotiating peace between species," Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of her former diplomatic rank. "But I've learned that some things cannot be negotiated. Some truths must be experienced." She nodded to Naya, who stepped forward with the fluid grace of her mixed heritage. As she walked, her skin began to glow with soft silver light, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. "I know what you see when you look at me," Naya said, her young voice somehow carrying to every corner of the plaza. "You see contamination. You see a weapon. You see something that threatens everything you believe about yourselves." The crowds pressed closer, humans and Valdris, alike drawn by something in her tone that transcended species barriers. "But I see something different," Naya continued, raising her hands as energy began to flow around her like liquid starlight. "I see the fear that drives you to hate. I see the loneliness that makes you push away anything different. And I see the love that you're all too afraid to acknowledge." The energy radiating from her touched the nearest observers, and something miraculous happened. For just a moment, the barriers between species dissolved. Humans felt the deep emotional resonance that guided Valdris society, while Valdris experienced the passionate creativity that drove human achievement. Gasps echoed through the plaza as beings who had spent lifetimes hating each other suddenly understood what they had in common: the desire to protect their families, to build something better for their children, to leave a legacy of hope rather than fear. "This is impossible," Vesh whispered, his hand reaching out involuntarily toward a human delegate who stood nearby. "No," Zara said, moving to stand beside her daughter. "This is what we could have been all along, if we'd had the courage to try." Crix stumbled backward, his mechanical eye sparking as it tried to process what he was experiencing. It's a trick. Some kind of mental manipulation." "It's empathy," Joran said simply, putting his arm around his wife's shoulders. One thing both our species forgot how to do." The moment stretched on, and Zara watched as centuries of mistrust began to crack under the weight of genuine understanding. Some would resist. There would always be those who chose fear over hope. But enough hearts had been touched to make a difference. As the energy faded, and Naya collapsed into her father's arms, exhausted but triumphant, Zara looked out over the transformed crowd. Humans and Valdris were talking, really talking, for the first time in generations. The first tentative steps toward something that might, someday, become true peace. "What happens now?" Joran asked, cradling their daughter as she recovered from her greatest act of courage. "Now we go home," Zara replied, thinking of the small house they'd built in the mountains of Nivalis, where bioluminescent flowers bloomed in the eternal twilight. "And we let the universe decide what to do with the gift she's given them." As their ship lifted off from Nexus Station, Zara watched the fleets begin to disperse, not in victory or defeat, but in contemplation. Two species stood at a crossroads, and for the first time in either of their histories, they were walking toward the future together. In her arms, Naya stirred and smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars beyond the viewport. She was no longer just a hybrid child caught between two worlds. She was the bridge that would carry them all into tomorrow. The Age of Unity had begun, born from the impossible love of two beings who had chosen hope over fear, and raised by their daughter, who embodied the best of both their kinds.